And I don't think a lot of people realize how much work it is for us to prep group classes. I honestly think it's more work than privates, just for my style of like what I feel comfortable doing. I have a very analytical brain. So reading a client's intake form and then coming up with a good plan of care for them, that is easier for me than planning a class that will probably be different because you don't know who's going to show up. And then holding space for 10 people or however many people show up to class. That is, for me, far more exhausting than doing a private client.
Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast with Reka. I am your host. I hope you are having a beautiful day so far. Today, I have an exciting and interesting interview to share with you with Brittany. I met Brittany through continuing education training with Smart Flow method with Annie Carpenter. We have taken a handful of trainings together, many of which was online training. So we would see each other through Zoom. But last year, I finally got to meet her in person. We were both in Oakland, California, traveling, me from LA and she was traveling from New York to take pranayama training with Annie Carpenter. And when we first met in person, we decided to have dinner together that same evening, and we chatted all night over amazing Ethiopian food. And we talked a lot about each other's background and our love and passion for movement, our dreams, and it was so easy to speak to her, and I felt like we became a real good friends in that week that we spent time together, less than a week that we spent time together. And she has such an interesting and different teaching career that I knew I wanted to interview her when I started this podcast. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, and she has her own business of private practice. So she only sees clients one-on-one. She is in school for yoga therapy. She has a background in dance, Pilates, and yoga. She also has a lot of anatomy and functional movement background. So more I speak to her about body and movement, I am always so amazed by how much she knows. And I admire her so much for such an amazing work that she does with passion and love for movement. And also she really cares about her clients, her students so much, and you can feel that from this interview. Also, she is the only person I know who teach more than me or more than anyone I know. At one point she was teaching 40 private clients a week. Now she is teaching a little bit over 30 clients, private clients a week, on top of going to school full-time to become a yoga therapist. She is such an amazing, strong woman with full of amazing knowledge, and I just cannot wait for you to get to know her from this podcast. Let me tell you a little bit about Brittany. Brittany is a yoga and Pilates teacher and a lover of all things movement. Her path started with injury and pain. Her injuries as a dancer led her to pursue a movement career oriented towards therapeutics and rehabilitation to support others experiencing chronic pain. She has an Ellie Herman Pilates certification, an advanced yoga certification from Annie Carpenter, and over 1,000 hours of continuing education in anatomy, functional movement, corrective exercise, somatic movement, breath work, and meditation. Britt is currently finishing a Master's of Science in Yoga Therapy through the Maryland Institute of Integrative Health. Through training and mentorship with various physical therapists, chiropractors, and somatic practitioners, Britt is experienced with yoga therapeutics and Pilates for injury management and prevention, pain disorders, inflammatory and autoimmune conditions, spinal conditions, pelvic health, and pre- and postnatal care. She is also experienced in breathwork and meditation to self-support mental health via nervous system regulation, cultivating a greater capacity to focus, be aware, and stay present. Her approach is to empower others. She believes in the individual's inner wisdom and our innate ability to heal ourselves, sometimes with a little support and guiding hand. So here is the conversation I had with Britt. I will talk to you on the other side. All right, welcome Brittany for coming to join my podcast, Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. Maybe tell the listener, where are you logging in from?
Thank you for having me. I'm logging in from Brooklyn, New York.
And how long have you been teaching yoga?
Well, I've only been teaching yoga for about 4 years, and but I've been teaching Pilates for a little over 6 years. And then before that, dance. So I've been in like the movement teaching field for about 10 years, but only teaching yoga for a very small amount of time compared to all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, with all of your Pilates and dancing background too, like what brought you to yoga initially?
Well, my first yoga class was when I was 16. I was dancing at this really small ballet studio in North Carolina, and there was a yoga studio next door, and class was canceled one day, but I was already there, and there was a yoga class happening at the same time. And so I just was like, okay, I want to move my body. I'm going to go do this thing. And after that, I mean, it was transformational for me. The Shavasana was incredible. And after that, I would occasionally cut ballet class to go to yoga instead. Mm-hmm. And so yoga has always been in my life as something that I do to support my physical and mental health. And when I started teaching Pilates and doing like rehabilitative movement and therapeutic movement with people, under the supervision of a physical therapist, I didn't really know that yoga could be integrated so well with what I was doing with people, but it was always something I did on my own. And I think I started to realize that I could bring yoga into what I was doing with my clients when they were asking about it. They were like, should I be doing yoga? Should I be doing Pilates? And that's kind of how it seeped in. It was a very natural evolution.
And you said you were hooked from the first Shavasana. So the first class you took was already transformational for you?
Yeah, I think that, I was, a dancer and a performer, and I had a lot of anxiety as a kid. And the yoga teacher, I still remember her. She was amazing and just made me feel so safe. And I could move my body. I could work with and I didn't know I was doing this at the time, of course, but I could work with my anxiety, but I could work with it without using words, and I could work with the anxiety, work with the mental things I was struggling with, but using my body to regulate my system. And by the time I was in Shavasana, I feel like it was the first time I think I'd experienced rest.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. I always hear story of people first class, and I was like hooked. That was it. Because my first yoga class, I just remember feeling like, oh my God, this is too boring. It's too slow. And I remember coming back to yoga for a couple more years since the first class I've taken. And I think I come from more athletic, like sports background. So Bikram, when I actually got introduced to Bikram yoga is when I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's like it pushes me, and I have transitioned to different styles of yoga since then. But I always love hearing stories of how people got started, and especially those who's like first class. And this was it. Wow. You had such a transformational experience in the first Shavasana. That's powerful. Do you still have those similar experience in Shavasana when you are practicing yoga today?
Yeah, not every Shavasana, but a lot of them. Yeah.
So it seems like you were a dancer first and then became a Pilates instructor and then became yoga. So I'm curious first to know, like, how did the dance transition to Pilates?
Yeah. I moved to New York, like right out of high school and to dance, of course. And then I had like a bunch of different injuries, like hip, foot, shin, low back, like name the injury. And I have something, either I have that or I've had one of those injuries just through dance because it is really hard on the body. And I was dealing with a hip injury at the time. And I was like, I think I was like 20 and I was walking down the street and saw a Pilates studio and was like, you know what? Maybe I need to move my body. Maybe I'll try this. I'm not allowed to dance, but let me try this. And I signed up for class the following day, went into class, and it was the owner who was teaching. And at the end, I loved the class. It was amazing. And I could like really work with things in my body that were weak and neglected that I wasn't working with ballet. Mm-hmm. And the owner of the studio was like, oh, you're a dancer, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, dealing with some injuries. So I'm not really doing it right now. And she was like, well, we have a teacher training coming up in a few months. Like if you are interested, like let me know and we can chat more. But it seems like Pilates is a good fit for you. And I wasn't doing anything else. So I was like, okay, like I guess I'll do this. Like at the time I was bartending and or serving and part-time nannying. It was, so I was like, maybe I'll try this. And and then a PT at the Pilates studio took me under her wing. And that's how I got into rehabilitative Pilates and therapeutics and working with injury prevention and injury recovery. So
that sounds amazing that PT at your Pilates studio took you under the wings. I remember when you first told me this story, and I'm like, I need to find PT like that. I'm like, who can I find?
I was really lucky because she gave me, of course I paid for her like master classes and workshops, but she gave me a lot of apprenticeship that, like, hey, do you want to observe me work with a client? Do you want to observe this? Or here I have a patient who I'm no longer seeing anymore. She needs Pilates. Here's what you should do with her. Like I really had a lot of mentorship and guidance from this physical therapist.
Yeah. And also even like, first of all, to have a PT at a Pilates studio sounds amazing because I don't really see that here in LA. And so working with that physical therapist, did that come after becoming a Pilates instructor or before?
It was like during my training and after. So I worked with her for a couple of years, I think. Yeah. And through clients, I met other practitioners, chiropractors, other PTs, massage therapists, and just kind of very slowly, like this wasn't overnight, but very slowly started to build a really nice network in Brooklyn of just different practitioners. And, we share clients, referrals and all of that. So yeah, it was a really slow but natural progression.
That sounds so amazing to hear that. And I want to know, so when you were slightly injured when you first walked into your Pilates class and took the class, learned that there's an instructor training or a teacher training happening soon. And maybe because you were already injured when you first started, do you think like your focus already from that point was like you wanted to work in a rehab therapeutic way? Because, a lot of Pilates instructors just go into just a group class teaching path as well. But it seems like for you from the beginning, you were more therapeutic, rehab, one-on-one kind of path that you were walking.
That's a really good way of phrasing that. I hadn't thought of it that way. I think I was just responding to where I was in the moment and without even thinking it through as much as you just articulated. Like I did, because during the training we were required to do like hundreds of hours of teaching, observation, training, all of that. And we had to teach both classes and privates as a part of we had to do student teaching hours. And the one-on-one interaction for me, like that's where I felt at home where I could move aside all of my stuff, right, and hold space for someone else. And even though I wasn't working necessarily from the yoga therapy side, which, I'm now in yoga therapy school as well. Even though I wasn't working from like therapeutic relationships and here's how we hold space and what are therapeutic boundaries, I was still holding space from like the scope of practice of a Pilates instructor. And I felt at home in holding that space one-on-one and helping like someone really understand their body. And you just don't get that in a group class. And that's fine. Like group class is great for like the students' autonomy and for them to have their own like experience. And I always describe it as like, I feel like the teachers, whether it's yoga or Pilates, like we're lifeguards in a group class. Like we're offering stuff to you and we're lifeguards to make sure that, everyone stays safe. But other than that, like the student can do whatever they want. Right. And it felt, I don't think I was as good at it. Like, yeah.
And I'm curious because I don't have a lot of Pilates experience except for just taking a few classes here and there. What was the training like? Like how many hours? Like for yoga, it's 200 hours to become certified yoga teacher initially. And it seems like there was more hours from what I'm hearing from you with the Pilates training.
Yeah. So it's 500 hours. And then she encouraged us like heavily, the owner of the studio heavily encouraged us to do these extra Pilates rehabilitative classes, like anatomy for injury prevention, functional anatomy and kinesiology, like all of these other classes that were either being taught by the PT or someone else who, had over a decade of experience in the field. So definitely did my 500 hours. And then I'd say I did maybe an extra 200 hours of continuing education during that time. I was just, when I had the first taste of really loving it, and I didn't know that I would love it, pursuing more knowledge and going to more trainings where I could help people learn tools to help people more, that was just natural. I saw something, I was like, oh, I should do that. Wow.
Now you're making me want to take Pilates training. And so out of those 500, how many hours did you say has to be like contact, like teaching 101?
100.
100. Okay.
And 100 with like supervision, guidance, mentorship, all of that. Mm-hmm. And then I can't remember how many observation hours we had, but we did have a lot of those too. Mm-hmm. It might have been like 50 observation hours. Mm-hmm. Also might have been 100, where we observe a Pilates instructor who's been teaching for at least like a certain number of years. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot just in that too, because I feel like, and I've done a yoga training as well and just finished Annie Carpenter's 300 hour. And I think in my 200 hour, like what we didn't have that I had in my Pilates training was that kind of just observing your teacher teaching. Mm-hmm. We had some of it, but we didn't have a lot of it.
Yeah. So true. Is there a governing body of Pilates? Like in yoga, there's a Yoga Alliance?
There is the Pilates Method Alliance, but it's not as organized as at least I don't think it is, as RYT. Mm-hmm. Like you can get PMA certified, but it's not required.
I'm curious because I know quite a bit of Pilates instructor, but I'm pretty sure not all of them went through that vigorous of a 500-hour training. Like I've seen some training that's are just a couple weekends.
Wait, really? Oh, wow.
So is there different tiers of like certification or like a title for Pilates instructor, kind of like 200-hour and 300-hour teachers?
Yeah, we don't have that. That would be nice.
Like the whole training you've taken sounds amazing and super in depth. And like, I love the focus on like therapeutic and rehabilitation. And there was PT in the studio. I would love to be in that learning environment.
Yeah, I didn't realize how lucky I was until after I was done and talking to other people like you about different experiences they'd had. I was really lucky to have an environment that didn't just throw you in the deep end with teaching. Because I've heard from a lot of new teachers, like they're scared to teach. And I didn't feel that when I got done with my training, because she really made sure that like we were ready to teach or going in with clients and going into teaching group classes.
Yeah. Oh, and how long was that 500 hour?
I think it was like 2 years total.
Wow.
Maybe I did mine in a year and a half. She had because we had like different modules of trainings, and that was over a fixed period of time. I want to say like 2 or 3 months. But to get all of our hours in, that took me, I think, a year and a half.
Wow. Oh, I want to take that training. Sounds amazing.
I'm not sure if it doesn't exist in the same way it does, because the owner of the studio has since moved because of the pandemic. But yeah, there's trainings like that for sure, like all over the US, I think.
I'll definitely look out for that. So you said you were bartending, serving, and dancing as your like profession when you first moved to New York, and it started your Pilates training, and that kind of led you to start teaching group and private Pilates classes?
Yes, I did teach group classes for a very short amount of time. And as my private Pilates schedule filled, I kept saying to the owner, I think I want to take this class off the schedule and just teach privates. And she was like, yeah, sure, whatever you want. And yeah, so it eventually got to the point where I only taught 1 or 2 group classes a week to keep that skill set honed, and about 30 to 35 private clients a week.
Wow. And how did the transition happen where you were like slowly, because you had other sources of income in a restaurant business and dancing and group Pilates and then private Pilates, like how did the transition happen, and how long was the transition to fully become mostly just doing private work?
That's a great question. I think the transition took maybe 6 months. And because, with restaurant work, it's really easy to say, oh, I don't want 3 shifts. I would like 2 shifts. So that's how it happened for me. I just kept going down in shifts until I had 1 restaurant shift a week.
Yeah.
And was mostly working at the Pilates studio, and would occasionally pick up like a babysitting gig here and there. Yeah. And then what happened is I got super burnt out, because I was even though I was working essentially what is a 40-hour week at the Pilates studio, and making enough money to pay for rent and everything, I got pretty sick because I was super burnt out, and I had to call out of my restaurant shift. And the owner of the restaurant, who I still will go to that same restaurant and say hi to him. He's great. The owner of the restaurant was like, I think that you're really burnt out, and I'm so sorry that you're sick, but do you think that you should still be working here? Because you have so much going on with your teaching. And I was like, you're right. I don't need to work here. And I think I was so scared because I was afraid of just letting go of a source of income and putting everything into my teaching.
Yes, I can completely 100% relate to that. And I still feel that almost every time I give up 1 class.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I still feel the fear, and I'm not very good at, letting go sometimes because it's a source of our income. And, what if we don't make enough next month? Like that kind of fear still runs in my head sometimes. And then I have a question. Were you still dancing at this point?
No. Yeah. I was taking class. I went to an audition here and there. That transition, psychologically was longer than what actually happened in my life. Even though I hadn't taken a dance job in a while, I still wanted that title in my head, that ego identity, right? And then when the pandemic happened, I completely let go of that. I was like, this is not bringing me joy. I don't know if it ever really did. I think what attracted me to dance was the physicality of it. The same thing that attracted me to yoga. I can be in my body, not in my head, and that feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
But with when the pandemic happened, I definitely let go of that ego identity of, oh, I need to identify as a dancer. And yeah.
I want to go back to talking about pandemic in a moment, but before, you were working mostly private one-on-one with Pilates, and that was at the Pilates studio. At this point, were you having your own client and kind of having your own business and like working out of your own office or renting space, or was it kind of?
No, I never wanted to have my own business. I never wanted to have my own private practice. I was so happy working for a boss and getting health insurance and a W-2. Very happy with that setup. And that only changed because of the pandemic.
So you were getting W-2 and you were getting work insurance and all of that through the Pilates studio?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing to hear, because you don't hear that many yoga studio offering that. Or, I'm sure maybe in the Pilates world, so you really have to work so many hours for the studio to.
Exactly. And I was working like I said, a 40-hour work week essentially. So.
And mostly only private, you said towards the end, like you weren't doing group. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So I want to know, like you said in the beginning of this interview, that your clients started asking, like, what about yoga? And it was kind of natural progression. So when did your, 200-hour training come in place? And also, what sparked your interest in taking 200?
So I actually did a 200-hour when I was like 17,
oh, wow.
Just because I loved it and wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. So I technically had that training, but I didn't teach at all after that. So out of respect for the yoga teaching field, I never called myself a yoga teacher until I did a second 200-hour because I wanted to, I did my first 200-hour for myself and going in just to deepen my practice, really. And then yoga was the support for my mental health, my physical health, all through my 10 years in New York. Mm-hmm. And then when the pandemic happened, I had been doing some pre-med courses to eventually go to PT school. Mm-hmm. As you know, that did not happen. Mm-hmm. When the pandemic happened, I was like, I don't want to do this. And I don't know, something in my gut just said, yeah, I don't want to be a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. Even though that's kind of the direction it seemed like my career was headed in. And there was an online yoga teacher training, 200-hour, and I did that. And that's when I really started, and my clients, the new clients I was getting and some of my existing clients, they were saying things to me like, wow, like it really feels like yoga asana and pranayama, the breathing techniques, that all of that is what my body needs right now. Mm-hmm. And so I always hesitate to say that I blended yoga and Pilates because they are, very separate and very different. But I had clients who would either lean more towards yoga and using yoga tools for their healing needs. Mm-hmm. Clients who lean more towards Pilates tools, and then clients who kind of shuttled between both. Mm-hmm. The way that my sessions run is that I don't just tell people what to do. I ask them, right? And it's this co-creation of a session based on what they need. And that's really how yoga therapy works as well, is it's this, you're building a therapeutic relationship with the client and co-creating a plan for them.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And did you ever teach a group yoga class after finishing your 200 online during the pandemic?
Yes, I did. One of my friends owns a studio in Brooklyn, and I just reached out to her and said, I have an idea for a yoga class. I want to use all of this anatomy background that I have and create a functional yoga class that is like hatha based. And yeah, so I did that for about a year and it was great. But then, life gets busy. So I took it off my schedule and I hope to add it back soon. But yeah, so I did one group class a week.
It was called functional yoga class?
Yes.
That name. I want to take that class. That sounds really fun. What do you think was about that class that was different than regular group class you'll see in the studio usually?
Well, it was a 75-minute class. I was kind of tethered to that time. I was like, I think that a 60-minute class is just not enough. And I know not everyone has the privilege to be able to say to the yoga studio, I want to teach a 75-minute class. I don't want to teach a 60-minute class. But I just was really fortunate to have this relationship with this studio owner. And she was like, yeah, whatever you want to do. And so 75-minute class, I made sure to, so the studio that that she has, we do an intake form. So I would have all of the information that students were willing to share with me, like injuries, what their goals are. And that is the intake process I do in my private business. And so I would really take time to get to know the students in the class. Another difference is that we capped it at 10. We didn't have any more than 10 just because it would have been harder to give individual attention in the class.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a vinyasa flow, right? And that's the most popular form of yoga. I love vinyasa flow. I do it in my personal practice. But when it comes to exploring different like anatomical concepts, like how to hinge at your hip or how to lift your shoulder without over engaging your upper traps, stuff like that. You have to stop and start the class sometimes to like break down what you're teaching and give a brief tutorial of different poses. So yeah, that's the kind of style of the class. And people really liked it. I think they said that they would learn a lot and that they learned a lot that they could take into their vinyasa classes. Not that they were doing that instead of vinyasa.
Oh, I love that. And I like that you made it almost like a requirement that you have to fill in this intake before you come into this class. And like you get to know their body and like, a little bit about them and their history before even, because usually in a group yoga class at a studio, you might sign like a liability form, but that's it. There's no intake to take the group class. So that sounds like a really cool class.
Yeah. And again, if we hadn't capped it at 10 and if it was bigger, like that would have been harder. So, if you're teaching a group class of like 30, 40 people, you just simply can't take the time to look through every single intake and provide a ton of individual attention, which is fine. Like those classes are great too. I think a lot of people who are dealing with pretty intense injuries like herniations, labral tears, and they're on the recovery side of that. It's like there needs to be this bridge between group classes and their PT, right? There needs to be a bridge so that they can safely resume their normal activity.
Yes. Oh, I love that. So I teach a class called Accessible Yoga class at one of the yoga studio I work at. And I feel like it's very similar to what you were offering in that class. The studio gives me a tiny room for it. So I can only fit 3 students. So it's 3 students and me. And, everybody who comes in have different stories of why they're here, like usually like recovering from a surgery or, chronic back pain or whatever it is. And I love that individualized attention I can give to people using as many props as we can. And so it sounds very similar. And I love that. Like you said, like you're filling that bridge between the PT and going back to regular yoga class or whatever fitness modality that you want to go back to. That is actually very necessary. Gap in the, I guess, yoga or any kind of movement modality world right now.
That's so cool. I love the idea of like very small group class.
I love that. Oh, this is so cool. Okay. So you got the 200 hour when you were 17, but you got it again during the pandemic training. And I actually really have a huge respect for you saying that I didn't want to call myself a yoga teacher and start teaching yoga until you did your second 200. I think that's very honorable that you said that. And then you got to your 200. So maybe going a little bit back, I want to know, how did the pandemic change your teaching life, teaching career, teaching path? What was it like before and what is it like now?
That's a really good question. So before, I think I was very, very focused on the physical body, injury prevention, injury management, pain management, all of that. And I was very sure that I was going to go to PT school. And the pandemic happened and I was like, nope, I don't want to go to PT school. I don't know what else I want to do, but I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And, like many others, I struggled with my mental health during 2020. And what I turned to, which is what I always turn to when I'm struggling with my mental health, was yoga and breath work and meditation and all of that. And I also started training with Annie Carpenter at that time as well. And I started gaining a lot more clarity on the connection between the gross layers of our existence, the Anamaya Kosha, mm-hmm. with the more subtle layers, right? So the connection between the mind and body. I started doing a lot of study in nervous system regulation and like how things manifest in all these multiple dimensions of our being. And I think I just naturally started bringing that into sessions with people. Even if we were working with the body, someone might say, oh, like I can't do this exercise, or I can't like pick up my kid because of my rotator cuff injury. And that hurt, like that feels so bad. And like kind of just linking how the physical body affects not only our mental health, but our social health and how we interact with others and our identity and how we take up space in the world. And all of those layers became so much more clear to me after the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then I enrolled in yoga therapy school.
And yes. Okay. So you decided to stop pursuing PT and decided to pursue yoga therapy. In between that is when you were taking Annie Carpenter's classes.
Yes.
And her 300-hour modules. Oh, that's amazing. And I'm curious because I have, the thought of pursuing physical therapy education has popped into my head quite a bit, still does. I'm curious to know what made you know, like there was a certainty, like this is not where I want to continue pursuing, even though you were like already in pre-med, now studying pre-med. So I want to know, like, what was that inner knowing for you that you knew that PT wasn't the path?
I just had so many clients come to me and say things like, because you ask people how they're doing at the beginning of a session, and they'll talk about some stressor that happened in their life in between, since the last time I had seen them. And then they'll also at the same time talk about an increase in neck tension or back tension that might not have existed before. Right. And I just started to see this pattern of people talking about their psychological stress and how their pain was manifesting in their body. Mm. And yeah, so that I just started to really care not less about the physical body, but in addition to targeting the physical body, I really wanted to kind of expose this link between physical stressors and psychological stressors, right? And to help clients see for themselves, oh, when I'm anxious, my neck hurts, or something similar, right? Mm-hmm. or when I move my body, my anxiety is better. So it can go both ways. So I just started to care more about that crux between the mind-body connection. I started to care a lot more about how to help people regulate their nervous systems. And that is not what a PT does. A PT is designed to go in and address injury, very specific injury, and then to refer the client to safe movement practices after that.
Beautifully said. So you decided the yoga therapy was the path that you wanted to pursue. So when did that like seed plant in your mind about yoga therapy? And then like what made you choose the school, and what made you like actually like, I'm doing it, I'm going for it?
I was in Costa Rica doing like a yoga training, and someone on the staff was a yoga therapist. And I was like, oh, what is that? And she and I chatted a bunch, and she went to the school that I'm now at, the Maryland University of Integrative Health. It's a master's of science in yoga therapy. And she was like, it sounds like this might be a path that you want to explore based on what you want to do with clients.
And what is special about this school? That I know you told me this, but what is it about this yoga therapy school that's different than other yoga therapy schools?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily, because I haven't been to other yoga therapy schools, but you do get a master's degree, which if you care about that, like that's a nice bonus. And I did want to do something in higher education. So I could eventually maybe work in a school setting or something like that. I thought that having the master's degree would open up other doors for me career-wise. In addition, this school, it's a clinical program, so it is very research heavy. And not to dismiss the magic of yoga, because it is very magical, it's really nice to read research and to synthesize the research into like a case study for a client that you're working on. Because even though there is the intuitive wisdom of yoga, there is also a very rapidly growing body of research around yoga and yoga therapy that can help us just help other people more effectively.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned that this school is one of the few, or maybe the only, but the one that is a master's of science instead of masters of art.
Yeah, I think that there are two yoga, and I might be wrong, but when I looked a few years ago, there are two yoga therapy master's programs in the United States. This one, which is a master's of science, and one other, I believe it's in California, which is a master of arts.
Was it called LMU? There is a yoga therapy school in LA.
I think it might be that.
I'm curious. You were before the pandemic, you said you were working for a studio, you were like W-2 employee getting benefits and all of that. And you said that changed after the pandemic. You continue to see many one-on-one clients, but you're now doing it through your own business, correct?
Yes. So the pandemic happened, the studio closed. I kept seeing clients virtually through the studio. But then there was this transition because the studio owner moved out of New York. She sold her business to other teachers, and clients just started sending me money directly. And I was like, oh, what do I do with this? Because I did not know anything about owning and running a private practice. So, that's how it happened. And my first year of taxes were a complete disaster because I didn't know what I was doing. Now I know what I'm doing. But that's how it happened.
So I'm curious, like, you don't have to share the exact numbers, but before, when you're working for studio, obviously studio was taking a cut of your private client money. Like they'll pay a certain amount, studio makes some, you'll make some. Now, and when you transitioned to doing it kind of on your own, did your income kind of bump up?
It did. But then you have business expenses, you have health insurance, you have liability insurance, you have professional practitioner insurance, you have, and I have a physical space, just an office that I rent. So you have that. And then Squarespace costs money, and all of that. I use Acuity for my intake, I use Intake Q for my intake. And that, that's an expense. So there's all of these expenses, and then you have taxes. So am I making more money than I did when I was at a studio? Yes, but not that much more. Mm-hmm. And it is more work to, of course, run a private practice because I have to do my billing and bookkeeping. Yeah. So I'm glad I know that working for a studio and being a private practitioner, yes, you can make more money, but it's not that much more money. And it comes at a cost, right? Like the studio was a safety net. Mm-hmm. And I do have a pretty decent referral network. But if I didn't get referrals from the practitioners I was friendly with, then people would just walk to the studio and I could get referrals from the studio. Mm-hmm. So there's a give and take, pros and cons. Yeah. I love my clients. And at the end of the day, that's who I'm here to serve. And yeah.
How many private clients a week were you seeing before the pandemic when you were kind of doing this mostly full time, I believe? And then now, so what's your typical week look like now as a student, yoga therapy student, and who's also seeing a lot of private clients, and I guess kind of comparing to what it was before the pandemic?
So before the pandemic, I was seeing, oh gosh, this was too much. I was seeing 42 to 45 clients a week.
A week, and each session is 1 hour long? Mm-hmm. That's a lot.
I don't recommend to anyone listening to ever do that.
Yeah. Was there a requirement of how many you had to see to be eligible to receive the benefit from the studio as a full-time employee?
Yeah, but that number was only 30.
So what made you go for 45?
Well, I think that I found it hard to say no to a new client because it's like saying no to food and rent right. So I found it really hard to say no because I was like, well, it was always like, oh, I'll take this new client, even though I technically don't have time, but I'm sure that another client will drop off and it'll all even itself out. Mm-hmm. But that didn't really happen. I mean, yes, clients would leave, but more clients would come into my schedule than would leave. And then, but before the pandemic started, that's when the studio was running a wait list for me, which was very lucky to have been in that position.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of shows that people loved you and your work was, it was benefiting many, many people.
I think what I did well, that I didn't know I was doing well, because this is a skill set that we learn in yoga therapy school. But I think I just allowed clients to share their experience, to be themselves, to ask for what they wanted in the session and not give them what I thought they needed.
Yeah, I love that. And when you're seeing 40, 45 clients, did you have a day off, and was your hour from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or how was it? How are you juggling 45 clients in a week? That sounds almost impossible in my head.
Yeah, I had 1 day off. Also, don't recommend that ever to any new teacher. Always have 2 days off. And if they can be in a row, have them in a row. But I only had 1 day off a week. And I did a pretty insane thing with my schedule. I would start at 7 a.m. so that I got the before work crowd. Because again, before the pandemic, no one worked remote. Mm-hmm. So I would go, sometimes it would start at 6 and I do 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. clients. Mm-hmm. Then I would have my afternoon off while everyone was at work. And then I would do evening clients from like maybe 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. I would split my schedule like that during most of the weekdays. Friday, a lot of people have off Fridays. So I work straight through on Friday and ended earlier. And then Sunday I would work, like an 8-hour day.
Mm-hmm. And how's your weekly schedule look like now? Especially now you're in, you are almost about to graduate, but being in school also takes quite a bit of time of reading and studying and homework. So how's your schedule like now?
Yes, it's pretty intense, but I only take about 32 to 35 clients a week. With being in school, I actually only work 4 days a week. Mm-hmm. Occasionally I'll add the 5th day if I'm off of school, or if it's a lighter week, I'll just reach out to people and say, hey, like I'm taking clients on this day, or I'm seeing clients on this day. If you would like a session, let me know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so having a 3-day weekend is incredible. It's amazing. And it allows me to see the 35 clients in the 4 days and to really be present and to not burn out. So yeah, my work-life balance, even with school, is so much better than it was before the pandemic.
Still 35 seems a lot.
It is. It is.
Is there a lot of time you have to spend after each session with the client in terms of like sending out, I don't know, a summary, or how long does that usually take?
I'd say I probably on average have about 10 or 15 minutes of work per client a week, on average, because if I see someone once a week for 5 years, they're not going to need a home plan of care email after every session. But yeah, depending on what the client needs and what their learning style is, I'll send out materials. Like I'll record myself doing exercises that we've done and send it out to them. I'll record breath meditations, yoga nidras. I'll send out just like lists of different asanas or Pilates practices that they should do on their own for homework. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so fascinating though, how you live as a full-time yoga teacher / Pilates / maybe like a yoga therapy. Yeah. Yoga therapist. What would be ideal number of clients for you? Like what would feel like spacious, but still enough? Like what would your ideal week would be like?
I think about 30 clients a week would be enough. 7 clients a day, 4 days a week. Well, I guess 8. I'm bad at math. So yeah, something in that range. But I can't quite let myself go down that low. So I feel like I've made progress going from 45 to 35 clients.
Definitely. So you're averaging on the day that you do see clients, you're averaging about seven clients a day.
8. Yeah, 8 clients.
That's like 8 hours of client face-to-face work, plus like other, sending out information and all that afterwards. It's amazing to me that you can do that. And maybe it's different, because for me, I come from more group class experience, and I do teach private here and there, once or twice a week. Most of my teachings are group, and I just can't imagine teaching more than 4 or 5 group classes in a day.
I couldn't either. After a group class, I'm exhausted. That's why I don't teach them that much. Like if I teach a group class, it usually happens on a day when I don't have clients. Because you have to do your class prep. And I don't think a lot of people realize how much work it is for us to prep group classes. I honestly think it's more work than privates. Just for my style of what I feel comfortable doing. I have a very analytical brain. So reading a client's intake form and then coming up with a good plan of care for them, that is easier for me than planning a class that will probably be different because you don't know who's going to show up. And then holding space for 10 people or however many people show up to class. That is, for me, far more exhausting than doing a private client.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. For now, you're right now, currently, your stream of income is 100% private client work?
Yes.
Okay. And you are able to support yourself fully financially through this, your full-time business you kind of created for yourself.
Yes. Yes, I am.
Amazing. I think I'm so inspired by you. Like what you do and how you have built your business and your teaching career or your private teaching business. I think it's so inspiring and also like amazing. I'm always like so inspired every time I speak to you.
Oh, I'm so inspired by you, Rika.
No, seriously, I am. And not many yoga teachers who are full-time teacher or call themselves full-time teacher are, able to fully financially sustain themselves. So I think like I'm so inspired by how hard you work, but also like how you're so invested in continuing education and always training. And you're also like so humble and you are really all about like service. You really want to, I can hear that you really care about your clients so much. And
I do care about them a lot. And yeah. And I think that I hate seeing people suffer. And some of the skills I've learned in yoga therapy have been to have good emotional boundaries around helping a client who's suffering, but not letting that suffering impact my mental health outside of the session.
Yeah.
So I think it's been easier for me to hold space for private clients since being in yoga therapy school, because I feel like I'm cultivating better therapeutic boundaries around other clients' emotions.
Yeah. I can imagine that can be hard. I can feel it on me sometimes, even group classes or private, or even student wanting to have a conversation with me after class. It's hard not to take it home. It's sometimes.
Yeah. And I still take stuff home. Right. And I think that's where our personal practice comes in, and not neglecting our personal practice.
Yes, that's such a great advice for anyone or any teachers listening. So looking back at your journey, what are some key pieces of advice you wish someone had shared with you earlier in your teaching career?
Not to overwork. Make sure you have a 2-day weekend, no matter what. Say no when something doesn't work. When I was a younger teacher, I definitely would say yes to a 5:30 a.m. client, and then the night before go, what have I done? So being able to say no, because people will respect you and it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
Really funny story about saying no, just like quick sidebar. I am not a bar instructor, and the owner of the studio asked me to teach bar because she had no one else. And she's like, you're a ballet dancer. You should be able to do this. And I was like, please don't make me do this. And she was like, please, we need someone. And I was like, it was just very, very hard. I didn't have great boundaries around like being able to say no at that time. And so I went in, taught this bar class, and got really negative reviews of it afterwards because I was teaching like ballet technique, but that's not what bar is. Bar is something different. And from that moment, I learned, okay, I have to say no, because this was not a class that the students expected. And if I had said no, it would have been better for everyone.
I think I think we learn as we go as a yoga teacher, right? Like I feel like I've said yes to too many things that my body and my heart was saying no to.
Yes. And the students can feel it. And they're like, they just don't feel that our heart is in it when we are doing something that we do not want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Students can tell for sure. Was there any particular turning point in your teaching career that influenced your path that you're on?
Definitely the pandemic. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people that probably is true, right? Like the pandemic is what was this big turning point for all of us. We all had a little extra time, or most of us had a little extra time, not the healthcare workers who supported us. But yoga teachers, I think we had extra time because, I have friends who travel all around to teach their group classes, right? And now they were doing stuff virtual. So I think that extra time allowed for more introspection and self-reflection. And the pandemic kind of made me take stock and take inventory of what do I want my life to look like, and what do I actually want to do?
Mm-hmm. And I do want to ask questions of like, where do you see yourself going in the future? But before that, I want to ask, what aspect of being a full-time teacher do you love the most, and what is the most challenging for you right now?
I think what I love the most, I just love being in the room with someone and hearing them share what's going on with their body, their mind, their life, and coming up with helping them figure out yoga practices to support their overall well-being. I love that. It's such a joy to be able to do that. And then to do that in my own personal practice, right? To have this inquiry process, this checking in with myself and like, what do I need today? And then I guess the thing that I don't like about being a full-time yoga teacher or a yoga therapist eventually is I don't like being a business owner. You don't have as much of a safety net, of course, and that can be really scary for people. I think some people love like having a private practice or just having that lifestyle. And I think for me, I know that eventually I do want to move back into having more of a safety net and working for an institution of some kind, and then having a yoga practice on the side, a yoga therapy practice on the side.
Mm-hmm. Going back to your business side, it seems like you're able to find most of your clients through referrals and like people recommending you, and also like partnership you have built or relationship you have built with PT or chiropractor and people like that in the area that you live. And do you ever feel like you have to promote yourself, market yourself, or you are able to find enough clients just by referrals?
Yeah, I'm able to find enough clients just by referrals, and the social media marketing doesn't really work for me. I'm not very good at social media. I know it's a skill that you have to learn, and I think that the in-person connections are so valuable, and so I feel like that's where quality client referrals still comes from, at least just where I live in Brooklyn. Even for the PTs I work with, like they might get patients through their website, but most of them I talk to say, I get referrals from doctors, from you, from other practitioners.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's amazing because you said social media is a skill you have to do or learn. And I don't think so. I don't think you have to, because somebody like you, who your business is thriving, you have plenty of clients, coming to you, wanting your service, and, without promoting it on social media, or having paid ads or, SEOs on a website. And I know other like massage therapists who are like that. I know yoga teachers who are like that. And I know social media can be such a helpful tool, but I don't think it's the only path to, to grow your business. So, and you are such a great example of that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Daunting for me, social media. And I'm sure it is for other people too, but it's,
And I think it kind of shows how great you are at your skills, and people are wanting your service and people are recommending you, and I think that's amazing. So where do you see yourself going now that you're almost graduating yoga therapy school and you're going to become a official certified yoga therapist? And where do you see yourself going?
Well, I will take a break from school and trainings. And then I intend to go back to school just one more time to get a master's in social work. Through the yoga therapy school, I've really learned that what I want to do with clients would actually be more suitable in like a clinical therapy environment. So yeah, I want to go to social work school, and that will help me be able to work. Like I've said, I wanted to move out of being only a private practitioner. I think I'd love to work in a school. I have a few teenagers that I work with now, and I think bringing the yoga therapy into a school from the, like, as a social worker, I think is kind of my next stage of my career that I want to work towards.
I love that. And I love that because I haven't heard that before, right? Like, it's not like a common path that a yoga teacher takes or a yoga therapist take. And is it because you think as a yoga therapist, it would be difficult to get into a school system to get hired as a full-time employee? But if you have a social work certification, graduate degree, you can get in and start working in school, and then you can bring in your yoga therapy knowledge.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you, Brittany, so much. This has been such an amazing conversation, and I'm sure listeners learned so much and are hopefully inspired as much as I am. But is there anything else that we have missed that you want to say, or any anything you want to share in terms of any advice you want to share to any teachers listening to this?
No, I think we touched on everything. Thank you so much for having me. I think my main advice is take care of yourself and prevent burnout, because I have burnt out a few times, not once. Sometimes it takes me a while to learn a life lesson, and that is a lesson I've learned a few times.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, and I think that is a very important and helpful advice. Is always take care of yourself. And you said something beautiful about always keep your practice, continue practicing. Okay, how can somebody find you if they want to reach out to you, maybe have questions or want to work with you? What are the best ways that they can find you?
Well, I do have a website, BrittanyRowell.com. And then I do have an Instagram. That's Britt with one T, Britt Rowell. And I don't post a lot, but I will respond to messages in a timely manner. Yeah, that's how I can be reached.
Thank you so much. And I'll make sure to link all of that on the show notes. And thank you so much, Britt, for taking your time to chat with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was so great.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed our conversation together. I think it's so fascinating to see all the different ways yoga teachers make this into a full-time. She is one of the few that I know who make private one-on-one work as her full-time job, and she prefers to teach one-on-one than group classes, as you can tell from the conversation that we had. It's really hard for me to imagine in my head teaching 30 to 40 private one-on-one a week and not get exhausted. I feel like when I teach 20 classes a week, I'm exhausted. But like she said, I teach group classes mostly. She teaches one-on-one, and she said that teaching group classes is a lot more exhausting. So I guess I wouldn't know what it's like to teach that many private one-on-ones. But I think it's so amazing she is doing it, and she enjoys this work more than group classes, and she is amazing at it. So I think this is such a great example. Another way to pursue your career as a yoga teacher is private one-on-one work. As always, I hope this conversation is interesting to you. you are learning something from these amazing teachers I get to interview, as well as maybe getting different ideas about how you can make full-time yoga teaching work and how your path doesn't have to look one specific way. Full-time yoga teaching can look many, many different ways, and it's up to us to find a path that works for us. As always, thank you so much for listening. You are always welcome to leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast. Send me a feedback, questions, recommendations by email or to my Instagram account. My Instagram is @reikayoga.com. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Talk to you next week. Bye.